In our last video, we went over how to modify Portra 160+1 to suit the BTM style, and that's where we came up with this edit here. Here's the before and after. So I'm going to try that same edit on other photos and see how they look. So I'm going to copy it. Make sure you don't copy the adjustments or anything, because it won't make sense for another photo. Copy. So this photo was taken months apart from the initial one, but the lighting is the same and the setting is actually the same. So I will paste, and that looks pretty good. I don't see much I would do to it other than erasing this pile of sticks. And to do that, I would press Q on the keyboard and just do it strips at a time, because I'm just copying and pasting another part of the image. And you don't want to select a spot that's bigger than the place that you can copy from. Okay, and I could keep going, but you get the point. And it already looks better. I would still go in and fix the fence a bit. Okay, before and after. Okay, we're gonna try it on a wedding that I did a few weeks ago. Paste, and that looks pretty good. I would bring my shadows up a bit. Compositionally, I don't love this photo, but it's not bad. Also, I would take the time to erase this little bit of fence here. Okay, that one looks good. That fits our style. Desaturated grass, warm skin tones, and not too overexposed. So this is the last wedding that I shot, and we worked with so many different light sources in such a short time, so I thought it would be a good wedding to quickly go through how I use this same preset for all of those pictures. So I'm going to reset this, apply the preset. I'll do this as quick as possible. Bring up the exposure, and honestly, I'd be happy with that. Shadows are warm, skin tones are warm, but there's still a good contrast. So I will go down, give it a slight vignette, just to make the subjects pop a little bit more. I'm happy with the white balance. I could go a tiny bit warmer and a tiny bit more pink. I think the shadows are a little dark. We could bring them up a tiny bit. So this one I have to be careful because my subject is blonde. So when I desaturate the yellows from the background, it's going to affect her hair. So I'm not going to do it too much. And then I'll bump up the luminance a bit. And I'm happy with this picture. That looks good. So I would copy that and move on to this picture of her and her mom. So this edit gave me so much trouble because of the changing light sources and how everybody in her family was blonde. And like the skin was looking too orange and the hair was looking too white. So it took a long time to find a happy medium. So I'm going to reset this and just start from scratch. Okay, we'll paste. And it's not bad, it's just too bright. So bring the exposure down. That's not horrible. I don't love the shadows on their faces. And there's clearly a lot of background distractions. And when you're shooting a wedding, I feel like we really need to make sure that the mom gets plenty of pictures with the bride. So you need to be extra careful with these shots, and you don't want to do anything that could risk an unhappy mother of the bride, because that's going to reflect badly on all of us. So if you see people in the background, just take the extra time to get rid of them. It doesn't have to look perfect because they won't know in the first place, but it's just better to be safe. So we're going to erase these people in little strips by pressing Q on the keyboard. Always take a lot of pictures of the mom. And like I said, it's not going to be perfect, but it's not really worth the risk to leave them. Okay, so that doesn't look amazing, but it's better than nothing. And typically I would take way more time on this just to make sure it looks believable. But for the sake of this little tutorial, I don't really want to waste your time, because you get how it works. And then I would crop those little extra people out. Try to keep the faces around the upper third of the image. Even though it's still a symmetrical picture with the fountain and the temple, you can still follow the rule of thirds with where their faces are. You don't want them too close to the bottom or too close to the top. So right around a third is a good place to keep the faces. And then if you can straighten out the lines in the background in every image, I think that's pretty important. There we go. So I'm actually really happy with how their skin looks and how their hair looks. Sometimes if I'm feeling generous, I will smooth the mom out a little bit. Anything to make the mother of the bride happy. So just drop your clarity a tiny bit and you just softened the shadows and the highlights. So that's how I would edit that picture. Here's another one that gave me a lot of trouble because now this time we have green grass and it's kind of backlit. So I'm going to reset it. I will copy this edit, paste it over here, and it just has a whole different look. I'm going to brighten it, warm it up, and that actually looks pretty good. Okay. Here are just some other images before and after, and they are a little bit bright, but I felt like for this lighting that's kind of how I had to edit it because when I dropped the exposure, I didn't like the shadows it casts on their faces. Okay, so we will go over how to edit a backlit image. So here's an example from the wedding, before and after. So we'll start fresh with this one. I will apply Portra 160+1 because I want that same tone curve with every single shot I take. Brighten it up a bit, bring the shadows up. And the thing about shooting backlit is it's always super, super warm, and that's okay, but we just don't want it too orange. So I usually go to my vibrance and bring that down a bit so it's more of like a beige tan rather than a glowing orange. Always bring my contrast up a tiny bit because the shadows and the highlights are pretty flat when you're shooting backlit. Make my whites a little brighter and my blacks a little bit darker. Just to compare, that's already done so much. And I would brighten it up a tiny bit, bring my shadows down a little bit, and I would be happy with that. Here's another one from the roof, before and after. Let's see how quickly we can edit this one by using what we just did. So I copied that last image and I'm going to paste it on them here. Looks like the shadows are too dark on their faces, so I will bring the blacks up a little bit and the shadows up. You have to be careful though, because if you bring the darker parts of the image up too high, you can see like a nasty grain. So sometimes it's just best to keep it a little lower to preserve the quality of the image. Okay, that looks good enough for now. Here is a reception image. I'm going to reset it. Reception lighting is always super warm and you're always shooting underexposed, so there is going to be a grain in most of your shots, and because you have to keep your f-stop down so low, I mean, you can't have them both in focus in most cases unless you're using a flash. And personally, I think shooting without a flash gives it more of an artistic high-end look, even though I know there are times where we don't have a choice. So I'll apply the preset, bring up the exposure, use the little dropper tool for the white balance, pick a spot of her dress, and just kind of keep clicking until I find a spot that I'm happy with. That one looks pretty good. I'll warm it up a tiny bit. I'll make it a little more, tiny bit more pink. I'm looking at this before and after. That's not bad. My goal for indoor shooting, whether it's the getting ready pictures in the bride's room or at the reception, look at her dress, and as long as it's white, you're usually pretty good. You just don't want the lights to be too yellow or too blue. I just make sure the bride's dress pops. That edit looks good enough for me. Before and after. Same thing for I always forget what this part is called. This part of the wedding. Sorry, I'm super tired. So I'm going to reset it. Oh, the send off. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to apply my preset. Obviously, it didn't do much. Exposure up. You have to fix the white balance. That is a little bit too blue. Okay. So I love the way their skin looks and the way her dress looks right now, but I don't love all this blue in the background, so I'm going to go down to the HSL sliders and just desaturate my blues. And the image looks so much better. And I'm also going to bring my yellows down just because I like to. I will warm it up a tiny bit more. And looking at it before and after, it's pretty good. You want your whites white. You don't want too much blue in the background. You don't want your yellows too yellow, so just be careful. You can always fix those things with the HSL sliders. Of course, I would do my whole routine that I showed you in the last video for every image. I would still give it a slight vignette, drag my midpoint, make sure there's a slight grain. I would go through a little bit of split toning just to make the highlights and shadows a hint warmer. If I am struggling with skin tones that are too orange, I obviously won't mess with the highlights. I never touch the tone curve. Vibrance is usually safe to bring up a little bit unless you're shooting backlit and it's already too orange, and I would bring it down. And clarity is usually safe to bump that a bit just to add a slight bit more of dimension. That looks good. So we went over backlit, reception, send off, temple, and when they come out of the temple, those were all different lighting sources. Same preset for every single one. All right, if you guys have any questions, especially while you're editing, you are free to message me anytime. Obviously, you are still free to make your own creative decisions, but just remember that when we are working as a team, we need to keep our work consistent. So please don't hesitate to ask. All right, thank you guys.